My name is Nicolette Johnson. I like to take this opportunity with the New Hanover County Schools Arts Roundtable to talk about collaboration with performing arts. I am a high school visual arts teacher at New Hanover High School. I'm also our art club advisor, and I added that on because a lot of the collaborations we do are actually done during art club time. And I also have Miss Hannah James, who is our high school choral director. We also have a theater director, but it is our choral director that I've worked with the longest. So I wanted to have this conversation with her just to share our experiences of working together. Some of the benefits of working with the performing arts includes authentic collaboration. What I mean by this is that you're working together not just because it says in a standard somewhere you have to, or because you think it looks good. It's because artists and performing artists are helping one another to accomplish their goals. And so instead of being forced collaboration where, oh, you have to work on this one project just because, it feels a lot more authentic, in my opinion. There's also the presentation of student work in non-traditional format. While we're used to artists, displaying their artwork in museums, I haven't once walked into a theater or a performance and not marveled at the wonderful visual artwork that also goes into it. This also fosters a sense of community in the visual and performing arts department at your school. I know that because we've worked together this way, we each have picked up on how each other works. And so it's built a lot of trust, a lot of feeling like we can help each other out without feeling like we're owed or have to do it. It also increases a sense of belonging for students. They feel like they belong to a department that's trying to make all this cool stuff. They feel like they are contributing to not only the art department, but also their school. And this also helps with the retention and recruitment of students. You're going to have students that keep on wanting to come back if they tie in their pride to, oh, I helped the production last year and this year we're doing so and so and I can't wait to work on that. Like you get a lot more retention and you get students drawing in their friends and other students into it and it turns into a really fun thing. It's also really fun and relaxing as long as it's not rushed, which we'll get into later. Some of the difficulties is that it can be messy. Theater and orchestra and band things can be very large, can require a lot of like different moving parts. So if you're dealing with paint, spray paint, that kind of thing, the picture at the bottom is one of my dearly beloved students that right after the staircase in my back had been pressure washed. She was a little too eager to help out with some props for the theater. So I have a spray painted outline of rectangle from that, which was my fault because I didn't communicate clearly enough for us to be careful with that staircase. So it can get messy. It also really can be time consuming because of so many little moving parts that go on to making things. And if you have to wait for paint to dry, or if you have to wait for students to come in, or if you're doing it through art club and they only meet once a week, that can also take up your time. It does use materials, but usually for us, we kind of work out a system of making sure that we're either using materials we already have or sourcing materials that kind of can double duty. So if I'm painting something for a theater with prop, not only am I using the paint, but I'm also talking to students about color theory, about how to properly use the paints, clean out your brushes, that kind of thing. So it turns into a lesson. Yes, it uses materials, but it turns into these wider lessons for our students. Not every student may be able to contribute in the same exact way, and that is okay, in my opinion. Just because you're not doing super fine detail on this one thing doesn't mean you can't help get brushes or offer some encouragement or go grab tape for us. There is always something that you can contribute. It just may not be the same exact thing for everything. And then storing props takes a lot of space. They can get really big, or at least the things we do. So sometimes I have to literally have them sitting out in my classroom among my students and then just be careful with wet paint signs and that kind of thing to make sure they're not, uh, touching things that they shouldn't be.
I love being able to present work that's a little bit different, that's not necessarily super traditional, that kind of is a little bit more cutting edge or is just new. I also love being able to collaborate with other people in the arts department, because performing arts have a lot of opportunities to collaborate together, but it's nice to add another dimension to what we're doing. So adding that visual arts part to what we're doing musically is really rich opportunity for students and for us as people who are creating art. I love having the opportunity to build community within our school and build connections between different areas and different students who might not always get a chance to work together. So this is also something that has been really good for us when we are going to share what we have for things like Best Foot Forward and other examples like that. So it's nice to be able to share those ideas and share what we're doing. So it's not just one department or not just one aspect of art, but it adds multiple aspects of the art that's going on at our school. Um, just to echo some of the difficulties that we have, sometimes it can be tricky to work together, especially since in the makeup of our building, we're not necessarily super close to each other. Art is on the second floor, and vocal music and theater are on the basement. And then we've got on the other side of campus, on the other side of the street, we've got band and orchestra. So sometimes we have distance that makes things a little bit difficult. We have some difficulties sometimes with traveling with things and creating props and things like that that need to be transported a little bit differently. So that gives us some more things to problem solve as we're going. And so that can be a difficulty that we have, but it's really nice to be able to overall to be able to do this, even though there are some difficulties, like not every student is able to contribute just because of the size of some of the things that we're doing. Sometimes we have to pick and choose some students that is going to be the best opportunity for to be able to help us out.
What if you don't know your performing arts teachers? If you're new or in a different building than your coworkers, it can be hard to establish working relationships. And I'm under the impression that small acts can really help connect you with those other teachers. I recommend you try and sit with your department during staff meetings just to check in on, see how you're all doing, and if there is certain help that you're needed. Ask what they're doing in their class or curriculum. Even if you just offer to cover for a minute, I know I've had somebody walk in my room and I'm ecstatic because I really had to use the bathroom right then, and they were able to watch my class. While I went to the bathroom, I came back, and when we came back, I caught up with them, and it's just little things like that where you it can feel like you're kind of bursting in and kind of invading their space, but if you have good intentions, I think that really shows through.
Sitting with your department during staff meetings can be sometimes a really good thing to do because you can bounce ideas off of each other as you are getting ready to do things. Having a group chat, as silly as it may seem, to work with your peers on bouncing ideas off of each other, reading through emails or drafting ideas and saying, hey, what do you think about this? Do you think this could work? Would you be willing to do this? Has been really helpful. So building those relationships are really helpful, not only for collaborating, but also just for making it through the school year.
You can also pop in for after school rehearsals. I recently crashed the rehearsal like party with a student and just had a great time watching the students interact with one another. It's as long as you're not getting in the way, as long as you're not interrupting things, it's always good just to feel like that kind of environment going on. And you can also chat with your shared students. We have a lot of students that take multiple arts classes, and they're wonderful because they know all the work that goes into both or the multiple different classes that they have. So having a student that has that perspective is really great. Student led designs can be fantastic. Putting your students in charge can be really rewarding. As an instructor, you need to be careful to guide them in time management, available resources, and communication with performing arts director. So, as an example, with this student, they did this design on the left, which beautiful, gorgeous, loved it. For Jack and the Beanstalk and some other fairy tale based book covers. The issue we had is the scale of it was so big that she did need our assistance in coloring the pages, and then some of the wording we ended up cutting out on paper separately and then gluing on afterwards to help us save time. So we did have to be careful that luckily I had that construction paper. Luckily, we planned it out far enough in advance we were able to finish it, but you just have to be careful. And also, communicating with the performing arts director, there was a bucket that needed to be added that wasn't in the original sketch that was able to be made relatively quickly. But you just want to be in communication with your performing arts director to make sure everything's coming out the way that will help the production do well. And students of all skill levels can help with some of the planning and the production. So this image down here is with general students in art club. All they were doing was blocking in color. It's great for beginning students, and then later on, some of the upper level students handled the finer details of making that Jack and the Beanstalk design come to life. So you don't even have to have students that have like super interested in art. Two of the students in this group were actually trying to get volunteer time and weren't officially a part of art club, but they still love the experience of just being able to share in that production together. It also helps to break bigger sets into smaller parts. For this one, trees were needed. So I traced the shape for the first tree, and then students were able to use it as a template to make the other two trees. So sometimes there's technical things that can be kind of difficult for a student to solve. So it can be sometimes better to kind of work out yourself first, and then kind of explain to them the processes you went through, and then have them recreate that on their own. It if we were in more perfect conditions, the students would have the time and opportunity to be able to make all those explorations on their own, but we only had a certain amount of cardboard. We only had a certain amount of everything at that point. So I did have to step in and kind of uh, guide the student in using those materials at that time. But after that, blocking the brown color was an easy activity for again, my more general students that just kind of want to participate and aren't necessarily interested in having it be super high quality, that type of thing. And then students cut out leaves out of construction paper and glued them down afterwards. That was another thing where we had one high skill students just kind of monitor the other students so that they weren't clumping all the leaves all together or something that would be kind of distracting. But it was something that again everybody was able to participate in on. And they're not just physical sets. I would also tell you to consider things like projectors. We had a chorus performance, and instead of a physical set, they needed something to project in the background while they were singing. The song was about looking up, and so I had the idea of, oh, well, let's have a student draw eyes looking up, and then they had just learned about GIFs, like taking pictures of individual images and looping them together into a moving GIF or GIF, if you like to say it that way. Um, so using those skills, I had a student use a reference of her own eyes, of looking up and blinking, and then she drew only 6 images. There's 6 images on the right, and then we just looped them together to create that image that looks up in the background while the students were singing. EasyGIF.com Maker is the free online GIF maker we used, but I do know that there's a whole lot other programs that you can use that are relatively free. It's just been a really easy program for me to use for this kind of thing, and it was just fun to have her artwork literally displayed in the background as the students were singing. And it's also very shocking because you'd expect backgrounds to look like landscapes or that kind of thing. So just having this giant pair of eyes was a really fun, like artistic effect.
That turned out really well and was really an asset to our performance. I thought that it was something that was really nice to kind of give an extra dimension to what we were creating as performing artists, and kind of supplemented that.
Using reference images and having realistic expectations really help things go smoother. Um, We have a vision board currently going on for our current production where I can see examples of the color scheme, the kind of vibe they're going for, the like main important parts of the production, and that can really help me realize how to stay united with that idea. And then even having just reference images of maybe not an ideal, but just the general direction. So on the left hand side is what is used on like professional production, like in like an actual fully producing theater, of having a platform on wheels and then the big cage looking thing that is even being held up by some looks like some wires. We don't have all that going on. We do have a lot of cardboard that we use though. So when I was making the birdcage on the right hand side, an important thing is that one of the characters gets caught in the birdcage. And so I actually found out, okay, well, what's the height of the character in the birdcage? And luckily, she was a girl on the shorter side, only about 5'2" from what I remember. So instead of having to make a cage that's like somebody for 5'8", 5'9", a bigger cage, I was able to make one that was small enough that it was light enough that the girl was actually able to move it around herself. So instead of having to put it on a platform or have it being suspended by wires, the student was able to manipulate it, which is a lot easier to deal with, especially if you are performing in a place that isn't where your classes are. We actually use one of our local elementary schools to host our productions. And so we have to move all the props from our school to a couple miles down the road to another school. And we would not easily be able to get something on big casters over there, but something that's cardboard that can also be broken down. If you look at that line between the rectangular part and the top part of the cage, it actually comes apart in two, which makes it even easier to carry. So just thinking about these things of, well, it would be nice to have things that live forever and you can use again and again. Also, just being realistic about students being able to move things, students being able to handle things, that kind of thing. You also, up until now, this has been a lot of the arts supporting performing arts, but you also can take it in a different view. You can consider combining performances with a mini art show. We had an orchestra teacher a few years ago that had 3 songs. Our orchestra teacher gave us a list of the songs they were performing at their concert. And then I had a smaller group of upper level students. Each student chose a song and created an artwork based on it. Um, and then, so while the students were working on their individual pieces, we played the music in class as they were working on them. And that was really fun because I remember one was like a tango, so it was really fiery. And the student ended up drawing like a flamenco dancer. And then another one was a bit more somber and sad. So the student ended up drawing something that was more like from a graveyard scene. It was really nice to kind of see their interpretations of the song. And then at the actual orchestra performance, we had their pieces displayed outside the auditorium in a little mini art show to go along with the performance. And so that was really fun. It wasn't a whole lot of work because, again, it was a small upper level class, so I didn't have that many students in the class. So it was a lot more manageable than having, say, a whole ton going on. But again, it was just a lot of fun. And the violin, or no, that's not a violin, that's a cello. That cello, I think it's a bass cello, you see in this image was one of my art ones. She heard about what my upper level students were doing, and she was also in orchestra. So she convinced her friend to work with her, and the two of them made this cello as a project that wasn't even the project I had given the upper levels. They were doing an integrated project where they had to pick one of their other classes and make a project. So they got so inspired from my upper levels and seeing the cool things they were doing, they pushed their own project even higher because they were having so much fun with it. So that was like really great to see. Reasonable timelines are important. I would say in a normal school year, we have, um, if you're doing it in a semester, you have to have a much more strict timeline than, say, if you're having a sprint production. So if you're doing something in from like August into December, I would say in August, you need to already be communicating needs and sending reference images and discussing needed materials, because a lot of times you can source a lot of basic materials from interesting places. A lot of our bigger cardboard actually came from the school laptops we had gotten the year prior. It was the packaging for them. So you never know where materials can come from, where people will give them to you for free or just for the hassle of you taking it off their hands. And then I'd recommend that in about September, a teacher create an outline and the basic like objects for the students to figure out how much manpower it is going to take to complete each object. And then in around October, have students work on projects in class or after school. I actually usually have a combination. Art club will usually work on pieces for like a month or two, but I'll also have my early finishers or just students that are interested that will work on it during class. Because again, some kids just really love this kind of work, and if they see a big bird cage, they might have fun painting it. And why not tap into that interest? And then about November, I always make sure to send in progress pictures for adjustments. Again, like that bucket that we forgot about, we had to add in later. It's just important to make sure that you're designing for the production and not just designing, for pure fun of it. And then hopefully you get to enjoy the presentations of the students' work and get to really kind of feel a physical evidence of all the accomplishments you and your students have made. I will say that healthy boundaries are vital. You can say no, and you should say no to requests that don't benefit your students or yourself, so that you can save that time and energy to be there, to better be there for your students. Other people's lack of planning or consideration does not constitute an emergency on your part. Teachers are so often the people that are always trying to make everybody happy, that we are very prone to burning ourselves out. We are very prone to trying to take everything on at once instead of setting clear boundaries. So, this is your permission to make sure that you are doing something because it is making either you a better person or your students a better person. Don't just do it to make another teacher in your building happy or an admin build happy. Like, make sure you are doing it because it is an educational opportunity. And there's polite ways to ask for clarification or refuse a request. Ones I've used before is that, hi, that sounds like a fun opportunity, but I need more information before I can plan out how to accomplish this with my classes. Can you visit me to talk about it during hall duty? I would say something like this either in an email or even in person, just making it known that, hey, I'm interested, but I need to fully know what I'm getting into. And then also for rejection, hi, that sounds like a great opportunity, but not one that I can fit in my curriculum. You might have more luck reaching out to the entire school in an email for help. This is a great way to say that, hey, I can't do this right now because I have other things going on. And if you have supportive school staff, then they'll recognize that. I don't think I know anybody where I think that they don't have a lot going on and aren't trying the best for their students. So if you're just being honest with that boundary, it's very healthy for them to respect that. I actually had a situation where I was asked to help out create winter decorations for our school, but it was only about a week before they had to be made. And it was assumed that because I was the clay teacher, that would be an easy thing to make clay snowflakes. And in my head, I'm thinking, well, the kind of clay I have is very heavy. It takes time to let it dry and then fire it. And it's also just a heavy clay material. So my type of clay wasn't even an appropriate type of clay to use to make ornaments for. And I was a little bit sad that the person that asked this of me didn't quite think to ask if this was within the realm of what my materials are. But again, I don't expect that person to know everything that I do in my classroom, so that's not that big a deal. But I was very honest in saying that I'm sorry, but we are preparing for the art show, and so we can't do that right now. But maybe next year, if you give me more time and materials and kind of like help plan it out in advance, I can try and help you then. And so he took that answer and he actually didn't ask me the next year. Um, I would hope to think it was because he realized that my clay is not actually appropriate for that particular project. The kind of clay he used was like a foamy light clay, and I still have the ornament. It was a nice gesture for our teachers, but again, that opportunity would have been me or getting a student to just pump out like 100 snowflakes and then tying ribbons onto that, and that wouldn't have been something that benefited me, and that wouldn't have benefited my students. So I was appropriate in saying no to that opportunity.
It's really beneficial to do these things, but don't just do them for the sake of doing them, because sometimes you do have to have healthy boundaries. You do have to be able to say, I'm not able to do that at this time. So I think that's important on both the performers side and the visual arts side, but that's been really helpful.
Reusing materials is a great way to both save space, reduce our consumption of materials, and just help us think out of the box about things. I had this leftover cardboard from, again, the fairy tale thing that we did, and then we needed castles the next year. So I sent over this quick sketch being like, hey, this is the kind of castle you would want. And sure enough, that was what they wanted. They told me about some adjustments of adding some vines on the side, but just again, having those quick little confirmations is really important. You don't want to ever think that you're like bothering people, but it's much better to bother people for a quick minute than to make a mistake that's going to take an hour to fix. And then you can also think about enhancing your performance art spaces. This is our course room. It has a version of Van Gogh's Starry Night in the background with giant musical notes. There's a little musical moon on the right hand side with a bass clef, and then the treble clef is on the left hand side. I believe there's a bookcase there normally, and that's why it's kind of cut off like that. But this was actually done by a student years ago that was both a course student and an art student, and they just loved the course room, but they didn't like how kind of sad the space was down there because it is in our basement. So they used the opportunity to paint this giant mural down there, and it's still down there to this day.
That was done by a student in art club, that is similar to Starry Night, but with musical ideas instead of some of the other pieces of details that you find in the actual Starry Night. That's been something that I've been able to kind of theme the colors in my classroom around. It adds a bit of hominess to my classroom, and it's something that just makes it unique, that nobody else has the same mural as I do in my classroom, and it makes it one of a kind place for us to be, and to share and make music, and helps create a welcoming environment for my students.
So if students come to you or if you inspire them with ideas on how to improve our environment, as long as you get administrators to approve of it, and you're able to get those materials, because paint is quite expensive today. But it's such a touching thing that students walk in and feel like they're living in their own type of masterpiece when they walk in. So it's a great legacy to leave is having students improve their environments and leave their mark on the school. But not everything has to be big or extravagant. Outside of the theater room are commemorative signs for past performances. And so, usually, either a theater or art student would help work on that. And it could be super complicated or a little bit smaller, but it's nice to kind of have that snapshot of all the performances that have happened through the years by having that done. It's only about a foot by foot, it doesn't take too long, but it's just nice to be able to look back at them. And then for our band, they asked for decorative covers for their music stands. I unfortunately don't have a picture of what they look like. They did have that style, not the RDO, that cover on the bottom there that I found online. And we made it out of paper, and then we attached it onto their stands on the right hand side, so that from the front it looked kind of like jazzy and kind of formal looking, but really it's just a piece of paper kind of added on there. So again, not everything has to be big or extravagant. You can have these little ways of touches of adding art onto different parts.
So I really enjoy working with Miss Johnson, and I enjoy being able to combine what we're doing. Um, and it's just been a really good opportunity throughout the years to be able to do that. So I would highly recommend anyone else being able to um, combine their ideas with visual and performing arts. There's a lot of rich opportunities for you and your students. Again, I'm Hannah James. It's nice to talk to you. Thank you very much.
All right, and I'd just like to end with this quote. It is safe to say that a philosophy of art is sterilized unless it makes us aware of the function of art in relation to other modes of experience, which is John Dewey from Art as Experience. And I would like to thank you for considering working with your performing arts teachers. Goodbye.